Cheers from across the table, man.
Cheers,
Mike,
man.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to Manufacturing Happy Hour.
Good. I want to get loosened up.
Yes, absolutely. This is the way it was meant to be done, over beverages, hanging out at a bar. Since you picked the bar, tell us about the place. Where are we at right now, and what makes it special?
Well, Pete's Pub is my favorite bar, and what makes it special is Pete's son plays soccer with my son, so that's what makes it special. Is Pete Marshall, and I got introduced to Brady Street through him. So I'm not from Milwaukee, and
where are you from originally?
I'm from Central Illinois, cornfields and soybeans.
Okay, I saw you had some connections to U of I.
Yes, yeah, I'm a third-generation Illini.
Oh, there we go. All right.
Yeah. The first one that didn't play sports, but went into HR. Same difference.
Yeah,
but,
same difference. Okay, all right.
Yeah,
we'll roll with that.
Yeah,
HR.
Sports.
I'm sure it's a football match every once in a while too.
The trick to having a D1 athlete is not to marry a 5'1" person. But my mom's 5'1". So
okay, I gotcha.
I went in the academic route.
Fair. All right. Yeah, I saw you got an education degree originally. And for anyone listening not from Milwaukee, I mean, we're on Brady Street, iconic nightlife street here.
Yeah.
I would argue becoming even more iconic. Like, this has become one of the spots.
Every time I've been here, I've had a blast. I mean, and I'm not I wouldn't say I'm a bar guy. I'm not.
Sure.
I like beer, but I'm not a bar guy, and this is a fun place to be. And what makes it, actually just leadership talk in general. It's fun to talk different industries. So, you and I are from manufacturing, and so we talk to manufacturing leaders and what's that like to lead people and what's it like in your business. And it is crazy. We're going to talk about data here in a little bit.
Yeah.
It's crazy how much data goes into the bar business, and it's fascinating data. How long people are here, how many drinks they have, all that stuff is in inventory. It's really not that much different than what we do.
I was going to say, like, because I worked at a dive bar in college, and we did not have that type of data at all. It was very much, and this was back in like 2008, 2009. That was old school, the way it used to be done. Much like manufacturing was still very old school in a lot of ways back then too.
Right. You go to some shops, and you're like, oh man, I could help these guys out so much if they just had one little piece of data. You could make a difference. I've been in those small shops that are very old school, and I'm like, how do they make money? And then I've also been in the shops where you're like, what can we do better here? Well, I mean, this thing looks like science fiction. So I actually, that one, I went to the Kia plant in West Point, Georgia.
Okay.
So it was part of I was part of a group bringing Caterpillar to Georgia, and they showed us around the Kia plant, and I was like, this thing's from the future. I mean, it was awesome. Automation everywhere. There was a lot of employees, but still automated, and so they were just the way they could interact with the line. And so you take that example of the dive bar, right? I mean, you got people that make it work, right? And then you have the systems of the big infrastructure where they, they're clocking in stuff, they're keeping track of all that inventory. Same thing, just I think a beer is a little bit cheaper than a car.
Yeah, so. Maybe your next solution will be around Frontline bartenders here in the beer industry. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about Secchi and one of what will be a number of Frontline-centric episodes of Manufacturing Happy Hour coming up. So let's dive in. Let's say you're hanging out at Pete's Pub and you're having a beer with someone, and someone asks you, what is it that Secchi does? And that's Secchi spelled Secchi for anyone that's trying to Google it now.
Yes. It's I should go into where I came up with that name here. But
that's a good drinking story. Like, we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a second.
Go there in a minute.
But yeah, when someone asks you what you do, how do you answer that as if you're at the bar with them?
What we do is we cut turnover in half. That's what we do. And when I say that, people, at a bar, I got to make sure they know what I'm talking about. So turnover. we cut the turnover in half, and how we do that is employee relationship management.
Mm-hmm.
So and empowering through data. And if you have the right data and the right leaders, the right process, you can cut that turnover right, like within weeks of using their software. And so that's the idea isn't complicated, and that's one of the reasons it's so easily adopted. But it's as simple as relationship management. It's that simple.
Yeah. No, we're going to be talking data, leadership, process throughout this conversation. I do, since you brought it up, where did you get the name Secchi as well? We literally are here having beers right now, so I have to ask you.
Right. So you think about, you're sitting there and you're like, hey, I gotta name a company, and you have manufacturing happy hour, and you want that to show up on Google, right? So how do I get this software that doesn't exist? What what am I going to name it? And I ended up just trying, like, okay, employee trail was my first shot.
Okay.
And then you Google employee trail, and it shows up trails, and then there's a billion results on employees, and I'm like, no one's ever gonna, that doesn't stick. And then I said, it's clarity. This is what we do is we bring clarity to the front lines.
Yeah.
That executive leaders have no idea what's going on, but now with Secchi, you have clarity of what's going on. And so I ended up having a friend, Josh, who was bragging about how clear his lake was around this same time, the lake by his house. And a Secchi disc actually measures the clarity of water.
Okay.
And so you go, clarity of water, what does that have to do with anything? So we can look out at Lake Michigan right now, and I can tell you that it's clear today.
Yeah.
But I just got back from the Gulf, and I saw the Gulf, and it was clear there too.
Yeah.
Those are two different clarities, right? So this guy, Secchi, decides he's going to measure the clarity of water, and he creates a Secchi disc. You drop a disc into the water. Once you can't see the disc anymore, you pinch off a rope. Now I have a measurement. So he takes this really obtuse concept of clarity of water and creates crystal clear measurement. And so think about your workforce. I could walk into a plant. You've been in enough plants. You walk in. Within 15 minutes, you know how those employees are.
Mm-hmm.
Within 10 minutes. And it's not necessarily all measurable. It's how are the communication boards? Who said hi to me? Who's smiling? How are the employees interacting? How was the meeting? All those things go into it, but you don't have a measurement. And so with our software, you have a measurement. I can select an employee and tell you if they're good or bad with a measurable data. And so that the Secchi disc is a measurement of an obtuse, a tough thing to measure, and we're the same thing. Employee performance is a tough thing to measure.
I think that's a great origin story. I did not know Secchi was an individual that was measuring the clarity of water and found a way to comparatively measure the clarity of water. I'm glad we started off with that bar conversation. I've got one very much bar-centric question left before we kind of dive into your background. And I was listening to you on another podcast earlier today, and I heard you say that you're excited about the workforce challenges right now because it's forcing people to do things differently. Now, that's a very interesting comment because I know a lot of manufacturers that would say they're not excited about the workforce challenges right now. So my question then is, how are you seeing people start to do things differently because of these challenges?
Yeah, so the challenge of not having the labor pool where when I started working, the unemployment rate was, I started in boom and then it dropped off. The unemployment rate got as high as 10%, I think, in the county that I worked at Johns Manville. So we could let somebody go and bring in another person. It felt like it was a race to the bottom. Mm-hmm. And I saw that. I saw the way supervisors treated people, the way businesses treated people. And as an HR guy, we're teaching leadership. We want to be the best. And we want to treat people right, with fair, respectable, all that stuff. And the market wasn't there to where we were incentivized to do that. Now, of course, I worked for a great company. We treated people well. But when the market forces us to do stuff differently, you don't have a choice. So if you have a jerk supervisor on your team right now, good luck. Good freaking luck.
Yeah. You're going somewhere else.
You're going somewhere else. And so having sites all over the U.S., I could see it. You meet a few people and you're like, yeah, something's off here. And but there's no real consequence to being a jerk because people are like, I got to stay here. It's a good job. Now we our level of leadership. I don't know how we'd ever measure this, but I see it from the smallest businesses to the big business. You have to take care of your folks. And as our purpose statement with Secchi is let great workers do great work. And get out of their way and just let them do their dang job. And it's a time right now that the workforce has to treat people right, or you will lose them. Because I know people think it's money, and it is money. You have to pay a good rate and all that. But really, do they feel valued? And I've been teaching and coaching and mentoring and all last 15 years of how to treat people. I used to call it a respectful workplace training, which is union avoidance training. I used to go around and do that. And I used to call it be nice to people training. Just be a good dude. Just be a good person to people. It's not that it's not complicated, but until you have the incentive there, it doesn't happen at the same rate. So right now what I'm seeing is even at the conferences we've been at, the leadership level is raising, and it's going to have to continue.
Well, I like your comment that right now there are consequences to being a jerk. And we see that not just with frontline workers. We see that with a lot of employees that have options right now and are able to make the jump. Despite some softening in the job market, there's still that opportunity to go somewhere where you will get treated right. So I love the mission. I want to ask you more about your background, because it looks like you went to Illinois Wesleyan, you focused on education, and then you got your master's in HR. And like you said, you got some University of Illinois heritage.
Yes.
So I'm curious, what drew you to the field of HR initially?
Well, you say field, that's you're leading me into. You don't even know this, but
okay.
So I grew up working in cornfields.
Sure.
And my dad's a farmer, and
it seemed like there was a good shot of that based on where you grew up.
Yeah, I still have on my resume 15 years later. I went into the interview at Masterlock, and I have detasseling, so I ran detasseling crews on my resume. If I applied for a job in the Midwest, I would put it on there because it used to be a rite of passage. I don't know if it still is anymore, but you'd work in cornfields, and so I started in whenever it was legal and a little before probably, and ended up working for the wrestling coach, and then I did that for a few years. Then my dad said, "Hey, do some cleanup work for us," and then he paid me by the he paid me by the acre. At some point, I got some guys by the acre, and then I think when I was 15, maybe I was 15, because my partner had to be 16 because I didn't have a car, and we end up just killing it. We ended up just I at one point my brother and I had 80 people working for us, and I didn't know it at the time, but I was doing HR work.
Yeah.
I was doing onboarding because I was like, I'm sick of paying for people to learn how to do everything and wear the right clothes and, be safe. And so I created checklists. And then I ended up having orientation programs where I could get most of that stuff done before they were on the clock. And then my claim to fame was getting rid of water breaks. And you go, how do you do that in a cornfield? Well, one of the kids' dads worked at a Bell helmet factory, and they made hydro packs.
Okay.
So I got him hydro packs. So my brother and I, we ended up just making too much money, and we did a really good job. And here I'm going to be a teacher, and I'm going, I'm going to make 20. Like literally, that's my line when people complain about pay. I was like, hey, I was going to be a teacher, so the entry-level job pays more than what my brain was at.
Sure.
So I can relate I think it was like average salary was $24K out of school. Maybe it's $25. And So I made the switch, and I looked at MBA programs, ended up running across the Masters of HR for U of I, and I was like, wait a second, 95% placement rate, average salary was 3 times the teacher salary.
Yeah.
And I thought I could go back to teaching, but I can't go back into business. And just tons of manufacturers recruit HR folks out of U of I, so
yeah,
it's great.
No, I think you should have that cornfield experience on your LinkedIn profile. You got to tell that story more. That makes a lot of sense because you were engaging in an HR standpoint with the frontline workers on the cornfield. So very cool how this came to be. Now, when I look at your, let's say, quote-unquote professional career, like Fortune 500 career, let's call it that, you know, you spent a lot of time with 2 fairly iconic manufacturing companies like Johns Manville, and then you went over to Caterpillar after that. I'm curious, what did you notice when you went into the field in your first role? I think this was around 2006 with Johns Manville. What struck you about the nature of frontline work at that moment in time?
So I was celebrating that I got into the building construction division. It was building construction division. The division that built houses.
Sure.
In 2006, I was like, yes, I got placed with the building group. They are making so much money. My bonus is going to be sweet. And then you know what happened.
Sure.
And then our warehouse was full of insulation. We made fiberglass insulation. It was such a cool process. What I noticed early on is most of the issues are completely solvable for people, and it's just treating people with respect. And that's where I came up with one of my leadership philosophies is everyone's a leader. Like literally everyone's a leader. And the janitor, he and I would have conversations, and he said so many things. Larry Barry, R.I.P.
Yeah,
I miss that guy. But Larry would like just say things that I picked up on that I'm like, hey, I should be doing this differently. I should be talking to people differently. And he didn't know it at the time, but he very much influenced the way I interacted with folks.
Interesting.
And then getting out on the line, I was lucky enough. I had a boss, Joe, out of New Jersey. He's a guy that he goes, we don't stab people in the back in New Jersey. We stab them in the face. And I said, all right, yeah, okay, man. And he scared me. And he was a guy that worked every job in the plant. And he put an impression on me. He spent time with me. He said, look, you've never worked a day in your life. And I'm like, no, I worked in cornfields.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, you didn't work a day in your life. You went to school. You have a vision of where you're going. You didn't work, like real work, and where you come in every day. And this is just like, do you think that you're going to do the same thing every day? And do you think they care about profits? Do you think they care about making you more money? Mm-hmm. It doesn't affect them. It doesn't affect the guy that sits there and watches insulation go by. How much our profit is, mm-hmm. And I can like picture where I was when he had that conversation, because I was so upset that he told me I didn't work, because I pride myself on work. And Joe really taught me like the respect to the front line. And needless to say, I never put my degree up anywhere, and there's no reason to in a factory. The other thing that factory taught me is, one is I took a lot of heat about never buy a Audi in the deep south and show up. It was used. It was cheaper than all their trucks. But I rolled into that plant with an Audi, and I just caught so much hell.
That was not the first impression you wanted to make, was it?
No, horrible first impression. The second thing is when you're sitting there and you think you're smart, like I got my degree, and that I think this is something that I love to focus on the front line. I think I'm smart. And you get humbled over and over and over again. Like, just because somebody has a degree has no relation to their intelligence. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. I just experienced that. And it's honestly one of the best things that ever happened to my ego. Like, I got owned. I got guys that really taught me how to as I'm growing up, I was very cocky, and I just got like, hey, I need to listen to these folks.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad to see that we're in a space where people are putting, I don't want to say less value on degrees, but I think they're understanding what degrees and not having degrees really mean. Like, it's not an indicator of your success or your intelligence, like you're saying. We're definitely seeing that shift.
Yeah.
I was going to say in the field, not to continue the pun, but like just in society in general. We're starting to realize that. And I think as the world's become more connected, we've seen what countries like Germany have done, where like the apprenticeship program is like a highly respected field that, we kind of ignored for decades. So
I think along those lines of being humbled and, being cocky and all that at 22, 23 years old, I should say the HR manager quit right about the time the downturn happened, and they put me in charge as HR.
Oh, interesting.
And I didn't know what I was doing, so it was really great. But when you think about value and success, I had a conversation with he was a maintenance planner, and he said, look, Mike, you think success is, education, you're moving around. He's like, dude, I got my house on the hill, which in Georgia at that time you could, before they built all the plants there and made a lot of money, you could buy land for almost nothing, put a house on it. And he's like, I have a house on the hill. I clock out, and I don't have to worry about this place. Like, his success is exactly what the goal he set out to do. When we look back, when I look back in time, I'm like, my measure of success was only one side, and I think that's one of the problems with you look at degrees or you look at colleges, which college you go to. Look at success, because he didn't have to move. He was making a hell of a lot more money because he's a maintenance planner, as you and I both know. Those guys get paid a lot, and he was living his dream, and he was doing it at home, and he got to go to church on Sunday and see his family every night.
Yeah, he knew what he wanted out of life, and he found a way to get it.
Right.
Like, and didn't overcomplicate it.
Right. You don't have to be VP. You don't have to be a director to have that success. And it just Secchi and what you're doing too is just the respect of people that actually build. Like, I don't build. My hand. You and I shook hands. We don't build.
Yeah.
But just respecting the people that put this table together and put the equipment you're using together, it's a different mindset. And I'm glad to see more and more in what you're doing and what some of your other colleagues are doing with manufacturing. It's awesome.
So a couple of my takeaways from this first part of the conversation. I like what you said about everyone's a leader. Your story about Barry, Larry, I think you were trying to remember the name.
Larry Barry is his name.
Larry Barry?
I remember his name.
Oh, really? It's his last
Larry Barry.
No way. Okay, I thought you were
Larry,
like, I'm trying to remember what it was. No,
yeah.
So it's literally Larry Barry. That's a great name. That's a great name.
He was such a good dude. He invited me. Like, I got to go to his church. He was such a caring man and just respectful, and like, he knew I was young and he told me a few times, he goes, that ain't right what you just did. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is the janitor walking into me.
Yeah, this is very Breakfast Club, if you've seen that movie where the janitor's like the wisest person in the movie.
Yeah, he's a good dude. He did pass away a few years, but he was. It's funny when I get back with that crew and I'm back in Georgia and we talk about him. He's good, just a great guy.
Well, R.I.P. Larry Barry.
Yep.
Great lessons. Obviously, he's left a legacy that people remember. I've got to ask you, I didn't plan to ask this, but now that I think of it, you were an HR leader during the downturn in like 2008. How did you get through that? What was that like? I mean, someone that listens to this podcast a year or two down the line, we're going to have ebbs and flows in our economy. Some people say like it's a challenge right now. How did you lead through that, particularly when you're in a role that's very people-centric?
Yeah, so I did a lot of Googling for different careers, and I was like, I remember me and the lady who I call my HR mom, the lady who taught me how to really care for people at work in a professional way. We got so good at laying people off. We were just like, hey, here's your layoff. We knew how to do it where they'd maximize their unemployment benefit, and we would go up and down. I mean, just rolling layoffs that you never felt like we were ever going to get out of it. And I'm like, why did I go into manufacturing? This is the worst. And like I said, a race to the bottom. What kept me in it is those are the opportunities where things go down, and I'm all of a sudden I got a call. I was in this leadership development program at Johns Manville, and they said, we're ending the leadership development program. I'm like, dude, I moved to middle of nowhere, Georgia. Like, I don't have any friends, family. Like, what? And then a few weeks later, they called me, but the opening for the HR manager came open. They put me in it with no experience. They would have never done that, ever. I wouldn't do that today.
Yeah.
With no experience, 300-person plant, United Steelworkers. And it was just opportunity for me. I couldn't see it at the time, but it was such an opportunity. And Karen, the plant manager, took me under her wing and just made me good. And then during that downturn, the problems we have now are nothing compared to the problems we had. Like,
yeah,
not finding people. It's like, oh man, we're not going to make even more money. It was like, when are we going to get shut down? And we were shutting down plants left and right. And later on, I got to negotiate a shutdown agreement or be a part of a shutdown agreement negotiation, which was 4 weeks of just pain, of like seeing people in pain and like seeing people. You go, there were people at that plant at Johns Manville that couldn't read, and you go, what's going to happen to them? Like, morally, it was scary, and luckily we were able to keep that plant in Georgia running, and then they shut down that Pembroke, the New Jersey plant, and it just got started up again like a few years ago. So it's come around, but it was a different time, and I spent time looking at other careers, but I just kind of grinded it out, not on purpose, but.
Well, it sounds like you personally had an opportunity open up that wouldn't have opened up otherwise in this scenario. Yeah. But I wanted to hear that because I do think we make a big deal about how challenging things are right now. And I've just been thinking to myself, it's like, because I would say fortunate to be getting a job during the downturn or trying to look for a job because you didn't take it for granted. You were just like, oh, thank goodness I found something, right? And I'm just trying to keep it in perspective. You and I both have long careers ahead of us. Like, we're going to have to deal with downturns again. It's not if, it's when. Yeah. So appreciate you sharing that. I know those are challenging moments to work through, but I like the spin you were able to put on it. Let's jump to Caterpillar because you went there in around 2012. I want to ask you, what was different about the state of frontline work at that time? What did you notice going from Johns Manville to Caterpillar?
So Johns Manville is relatively small. It's not small, but when you go from JM to Caterpillar, it's small. Yeah. And I was able to convince the plant manager and the HR director. I checked all the boxes. I'd worked with local colleges in the area. Technical schools. We'd done some really cool stuff at Johns Manville to change that culture. And I was able to convince them. I go, hey, I know that it's going to be 1,400 people. It ended up being 1,800 when I left. But my biggest plant was 350 at that point. And so I maybe did the HR for 500 folks. And that plant was 1,800. And so the thing we had for us is the timing was excellent. The state of Georgia I can't say enough about doing business with the state of Georgia. They were great. Frontline leaders, we were able to pick really, really good people.
Okay.
And I would say the folks that we had in that startup team, we as a leadership team set a very good vision of what we wanted our culture to be, and we talked about it. I still laugh about this because I just haven't seen it since. We had a schedule of hiring 24 people a week or every other week, and then it ended up being weekly, and then it ended up being one of the managers sat me down and said, if you don't hire 300, I don't know how you're not going to have a job in the next month. Like, there was a lot of pressure to hire folks.
Wow.
So
how do you keep hiring that many people? How do you even keep track of that?
You don't.
Yeah.
You really don't.
Okay.
And
I'm starting to see where you might have come up with the idea to form Secchi? We'll get there later.
Right. So
I don't want to jump too far ahead.
Like I pride myself on caring about people, and so when we were hiring people so fast and connecting with them, it was a challenge. And then trying to keep track of who you're connecting with, who you're leading with. That moment though at CAT, the challenge was we were hiring 1,400 people. Well, the population's 120,000.
Yeah.
In the area at the time. It's bigger now, but I was like, we're hiring 1% of the workforce. How the heck are we going to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And so our whole leadership team was out in the community. We were doing speaking events every time we had the chance. That all being said, we had to attract them, then we had to keep them. So how did you keep them? And that's where we had great frontline leadership interactions and relationships. It's all relationships. That's it's cliche to say, whether you're in sales or you're in leadership, it's cliche, but the group we had built strong relationships, and so we had great engagement scores. But the idea of Secchi actually started at Johns Manville.
Oh, really?
Or
okay.
the concept of it.
Yeah. Well, trying to think. Do we jump to that right now?
Okay.
Well,
wait.
Well, because one thing I want to ask is, so you made the jump to Caterpillar. I'm curious, were the changes you saw in the state of frontline work there, would you say it was more a reflection of Caterpillar, or more like a reflection of the fact that it was 6 years later, things had changed in industry, we'd gone through a downturn? I'm curious.
We were just coming out of the downturn in 2012. Like, the business was there.
Yeah.
And one of the highlights for us, I mean, this is where, politicians, this is a story for you. So we have great leaders. We've got a great team at CAT. We're doing all cool stuff. We're helping the community. All these projects that were on hold in the community got approved because they're like, shoot, these people have health insurance. And this is where, like, the leadership team just had a deep, deep sense of purpose of what we're doing. Sure, we're making Caterpillar money. Sure, it's going to be awesome for our building construction products division, all that other stuff. But we knew that we are giving people jobs, or they're earning jobs that have health insurance, that have 401ks, that they now have a future that they didn't have before. And the hospital added another building because, I don't know if it's because, but it didn't hurt that we hired 1,800 people that went from these small-time shops to CAT. That was a huge challenge of recruiting people that they got their job because their daddy, and I can't tell you how many people just thought I would hire somebody because I knew them. Oh, hire my son. I'm like, no, that's not how big corporations work, buddy.
Yeah.
The state of it was, I would say Caterpillar had the infrastructure and systems to train folks, which was really helpful. And the people that we moved in, I think we had about 250 management employees there. I would say probably 20-ish were moved in from other CAT plants. And so those folks having the systems in place, that's what CAT had, is systems.
Okay.
Johns Manville, although it's big and they had systems, it wasn't as centralized and funded as it would have been like in the big corporation.
Got it. Okay. Centralized, funded systems. That's what separates the systems apart at one of the world's largest enterprises versus your regular enterprise. Let's call it that.
Yeah. So the downside of that is, like, I implemented a weld test, and holy moly, I had to get it past. I think it took me 6 months, maybe more, 8 months. We're hiring 300 welders, and people that are listening are like, how the heck do you hire 300 welders? And I was like, I do not know. We were just going to figure this out. Yeah. Well, we had a weld screening test. Well, to get it approved to use with the state of Georgia's help, we had to convince probably 12 different people at Caterpillar that this wasn't going to be discriminatory and we're not going to get sued and all that. Whereas at Johns Manville, I probably could have got it past 3 people and got it approved. So to make change there is really hard. Sure. On the flip side is you have a lot of efficiency and resources to execute when you need to execute. Yeah. As a frontline employee, they're not seeing that we're trying to make sure they don't see that bureaucracy. But
no, it makes sense. That makes sense. I'm going to go back to the question I was thinking about asking you is, now how did all this lead to Secchi? I know you had some other experiences in there, but I'm really curious how Secchi came to be. And you mentioned it was at Johns Manville was where you kind of first had that idea.
Yeah, so we had an access database.
Okay.
So I walk into Johns Manville, I don't know any better, and the supervisors start giving me a hard time. They're like, you don't let us get rid of any of the bad employees. And I was like, what do you mean? You just have to do your homework. Just do your documentation. Well, it takes too long and this, and they're complaining about all the processes. And I'm like, how do I make this easier? And at the time, we had a facility that uses an access database, and I was able to get some folks together that helped me create coachings and disciplines. So that system started off as a way to get rid of bad folks, which it did. We were able to get the documentation in place. When the documentation's in place, oh my gosh, engagement goes skyrocketed because nobody wants to work next to somebody that's lazy. And whether it's on this podcast or in a factory. And so we built this tool to get rid of bad people. That's like the origin story is that. But then we add coaching, and then we add recognition, and that access database is was the idea of like, hey, if we make it's where I learned if I make things easy for supervisors, they'll do the right thing. And if you look at any of your processes, are they hard for people to do? And back to the purpose statement, let great workers do great work, right? And so we did that access database. Then fast forward 14 years, or whatever, 13 years. And I call Melinda, the lady who had the access database that backfilled my job. I said, I was at Masterlock, and we came out of negotiations, and we had these grievances, and I probably shouldn't say how much we had to pay for those.
Sure.
But we didn't do a good job keeping track of our documentation.
Got it. Okay.
And I meet with Tony. I'm going to mention his name because he lives in town. I'm buddies with him now.
Yeah.
Tony Rainey. If you've ever dealt with labor unions, there's guys that, and this goes back to being humbled, there's guys that do the job, and there's guys who can really do the job. And Tony's one of those guys. And we're arguing about somebody coming back to work that had this horrible attendance problem. And I end up saying, hey, let's sidebar. And he and I go out in the room, and I'm like, you're just kicking my butt in this argument. What do we have to do to get these employees? We're going to have to bring them back. Okay, fine. But we got to make sure this doesn't continue. So what are we going to do? And in my head, I just wished I had that system. I wished I had that access database.
Yeah.
And I go back home. I'm at my parents' farm, and I called Melinda because it just was in my head, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I go, are you still using that database? And she says, yeah. She goes, we have it at like 10 plants. And I'm like, 15, or I guess it's 13 years ago, and you expanded it? Like, that was like, okay, that's old technology. Add in 15 years of experience. What could this look like? Yeah. And that's where I as a director, so I couldn't do it on Masterlock time. I had to do it on my own time, so I had to quit. But at that point, I was like, this works. This is a problem everywhere. I'm going to do it. Well, when we added recognition, all of a sudden I built a tool to fire people. Now it's a tool to retain people. It's the easiest thing, too. It's just having the data.
I want to ask kind of the flip side of this. How do frontline employees feel about systems like this? Because I like your line that you said, hey, no one wants to work next to someone that's lazy. But how do frontline workers, how do the team members respond to know when it's like, oh, man, they've got data on this now? I'm curious what your take on that is.
So we talked a lot about the bad side of like leadership and employee relationship management. The bad side is, there's these people that are really bad. But the good side is, I know, like, it's funny, this month, our recognitions doubled in November. So we have over we have a measurement of all the we call them connections, whether it's attendance.
And recognitions are part of the platform.
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
Part of the platform is recognition. So our recognitions doubled in November, and I'm like, what's going on? It's not like we doubled our population of users.
Yeah.
It's because Thanksgiving. Everybody's being grateful
right
now.
There you go. Okay, that makes sense. That's cool. That's a cool data point.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving. Well, I can tell you how many recognitions are sent out at each one of our customers. I can tell you, and the employees are receiving a text message within our platform that says, thank you for doing X, Y, or Z. And got a little story on that. I sat down with CEO, and I said, this was one of our early adopters. It was last year. And I said, hey, do you know this guy, Bill? He actually said yes, which I was like, dang, he knows his people. I mean, they have 700 employees. And he goes, yeah, I heard about that guy. And I go, did you know that this company does logistics? They systematically lost 2 pallets. This entry-level guy got it back in the system, communicated to the whole team, got it to the customer last week. And he's like, that's awesome. I go, when are you going to Fort Worth next? He said, 2 weeks. I said, go shake Bill's hand and tell him you found those 2, that you appreciate him finding those 2 pallets. So that executive level view to know exactly what that person did, the engagement. I mean, is Bill ever going to leave? The CEO knows his name and what he does.
Good point.
So of course, this program was like we talked a lot about the negative side. This program was built to just kind of CYA. But then what happened is, if you ever heard of software building, you listen to the customers, you're doing new features. This is a complete culture development tool. So I said, what do you do? You cut turnover in half. How do you do that? Well, what if I could tell you exactly who does your work and exactly what they've done? And you're an executive. So when you go to visit a plant, you have a picture of the person, you know how many days they missed, you know how much, you know what they've been coached on, you know what they're doing great. And to break it down to a level that even machine level or process, it's just unprecedented transparency for the execs.
Well, one of the initial questions I wanted to answer during this conversation was, what does it mean to simplify performance in employee relationship management? And I think your stories have really shined a light on that. One thing you mentioned at the start of the interview was, because you mentioned you cut turnover in half. I think that's going to be one of the things people remember from this conversation. And you mentioned it's because it's data, it's leadership, and process. I've got a question along these lines, because when I looked at your LinkedIn earlier, you talk about data, teamwork, and courage as the values that Secchi holds dear. So what is let's revisit this a little bit. Why data, teamwork, and courage? Why those 3, and what do those have to do with employee relationship management?
So when you generally think about employee relationship management, you don't think about data. And that mostly has to do with you're like, oh, they're a good leader, they're a great leader. And we want to bring this level of transparency with data that we're no longer making feelings decisions with folks. We're making data-driven decisions, and we're taking away the administrative work around those data-driven. Let great workers do great work. Get the data in front of people. We are a data-driven business. Manufacturers are data-driven companies. We align well. You add in the teamwork, and actually it says in our little sheet that's not on the web, our internal sheet, is that everyone's a leader. So that's the teamwork of, okay, I'm going to listen to everyone. It doesn't mean I have to do it, but I'm going to listen to them because there's something I can learn from everyone. And even your worst employee you can learn something from. Even your best employee you better be learning from. And then courage is, hey, I always wondered why HR people had to worry about having a seat at the table. I never really had that problem. And it's because I'm running into HR folks that we sold HR for a little bit. And HR, quite frankly, a lot of people in HR don't have the courage to make the change or add or propose this. They know how wasteful some of their processes are, but they don't want to say, hey, I have the courage to change that.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so we want to work with people that want to make bold decisions because it's the easiest thing for us to say, oh, we already have an HRIS system. Oh, our time clocks do that automatically.
Yeah.
They don't. They freaking don't. They don't. Anybody that thinks out there that your time clocks are doing stuff automatically for you and keeping track of employees and creating a relationship, I challenge you. I will come out to your plant for free, and I can process map it, and I can show you that it's not happening. But so you add in that courage piece of like, hey, we're relatively new technology. We're 2 years old, and a year operational, and so you got to take courage to trust that we can execute, and also you have to take the step as a leader to think your supervisors are capable of leading people. If you don't think supervisors are capable, if you're cowardly and think the supervisors can't do it, I hear that sometimes. No, supervisors won't do it. I haven't had an adoption problem with supervisors with our product. It just doesn't happen because it makes their life so much easier.
It's an empowering product is what it sounds like.
It is very empowering.
And it's funny that you talked about like the, clocking in, clocking out, because when I first started doing my research on Secchi and on you and trying to understand what does this system do, those are one of the first things that jumped out at me. But I don't want to make this overblown, but I haven't really thought about that much during this conversation because it really feels like more of I don't want to say a character tracking platform, but it's a good way to, capture what someone's real character is.
Yeah.
Was how I've interpreted some aspects of our conversation.
Right. So one of the features is we look at a holistic view. Imagine if you could look at a 12-month calendar and I could show you the things you did good, the things you did bad, the dates you missed in a one visual view. Like that, I have your performance. In a snap of fingers, I have your performance. And it's real data. It's not, I feel like they did this. And that's another misnomer is like, we have performance reviews at our company. Oh, you do? Your frontline leaders that direct 40 people are writing performance reviews for each employee that are meaningful and your employees care about it? No, they don't. They don't. And I feel like I'm like attacking now, but I am. I'm like, it's foolish to think, and this is another story of that Johns Manville plant. I built this humbling experience. I built this great performance review process, and I rolled it out to the supervisors. Didn't get their normal HR guy stuff.
Yeah.
They didn't get their feedback. I just kind of like, hey guys, supervisor meeting, you all are doing this next, it's probably in October. They had to do it in December, and they're like, you're freaking crazy. They basically rolled this nice piece of paper and threw it back at me. We're not doing it. It's an hour to set up. It's an hour to get them off the floor. By the time I talk with them, then they're going to have an issue. So now I have meetings with you. This is not meaningful. This is not a good thing for us. And so one of the things I like to do is break things down simply. And the simple thing is hourly performance management. Did you show up on time every day scheduled? Did you do something great? Did you do something wrong? That's it.
That's a very simple way to break it down. I like that.
Now, you carry a booklet. I carry a booklet. Everybody that listens to Manufacturing Happy Hour carries around a book. We all do it. Go to a meeting in a manufacturing plant, you see it.
The book could be on your phone, too. Some people have a very disciplined way of keeping notes on their phone.
Yes, there are.
Didn't need to be a literal booklet. I just want to make sure the folks out there listening knew that as well.
There are some. There's some really cool OneNotes.
Yeah.
That being said, is if you could take your book and I could pull out all the employees the dates they weren't there.
Yeah.
The things they did great, the things they did bad, and I could put it on a one sheet. And you sit down to do your performance review and see it in color. I mean, one of the customers, the supervisor, is like, you just saved me hours and hours of work. And the best part, it's all defensible because it's all documented. So
yeah.
I don't. A lot of people think the time HRIS. We're not an HRIS system. I don't want to be HR. No ops manager wants an HRIS system. There's 50 clicks. We're a employee relationship program that's built for ops leaders.
Yeah, and you've talked about how it's simplified for them as well. And I like the way you simplified it with your your 3 bullets you listed right there. And by the way, for everyone out there that wants to check out Secchi, we're going to have links in the show notes at manufacturinghappyhour.com. Again, that's SECCHI. I'm going to spell it multiple times out loud so people know how to find it. No, it's not like SEKI or something like that.
No, SECCHI. It's Italian. Angelo Secchi.
Yes, we got you covered there. So we're getting to the end of our beers, and we're also getting to the end of our conversation. So I only have a couple more questions. This one's a big one. I want you take this however you want, answer it however you want. Are we entering the age of the frontline worker? Because this is a constant theme on the podcast lately. People that have created solutions that are meant to, I'll say, empower the frontline worker in different ways. Like some of them are how-tos. You're doing a platform that's very HR-centric. Are we entering the age of the frontline worker?
100%. The all-stars, think about running backs in the 90s for football, right? Like Emmitt Smith,
Marshall Faulk, right at the end of the 90s. Yeah.
Thurman Thomas, right? Like we all knew the star running backs.
Yeah.
And then you moved into the 2 backs. You now running backs are there's some standouts, but they're not
like some 3-headed monsters on teams that have 3 different running backs they rotate between.
Yes, and so the stars were the running backs.
Yeah.
And now the stars, I'll call out a Wisconsin native and friend of one of our co-founders, like Joe Thomas just got into the Hall of Fame, a Wisconsin grad, O-lineman, right? It's like the stars aren't just running backs anymore, and running backs and quarterbacks. And so I think when you apply that analogy to manufacturing, it's like the front line's kind of been the O-line. They're underappreciated group of folks that have to go every day, grind, that run into problems, that have to fix things. And then you got the quarterback in the front office that has to pay more attention to those folks. And I think, like, you want to win, you want to have the smartest front line, smartest O-line you can have, the one who knows how to do the play. And, and going back to the 90s and being a part of, being educated at the back end of the 90s is you look at what GE did with Six Sigma. And Six Sigma is mostly, I'm simplifying it, it's good project management, but it's mostly listen to your frontline people.
Yeah.
And then lean manufacturing, listen to your frontline people. That start, it's already been in motion for 20 plus years. Now we're at the level where but there's events where high school graduates put on their plumbing hats and put on their manufacturing hats instead of their colleges, because we are moving to, oh my gosh, these jobs are going to be so impactful, and a really, really great process tech is more valuable than a manager with a degree.
Yeah.
Because we can, I figured it out. I'm like, HR can be replaced pretty dang easy, but that guy who knows how to use the melter, the guy who can weld 3 different machines.
That's specialized, and it takes a while to be able to finesse it like those folks can.
I think the tables are really headed that way, and wages are headed that way too, which is good. I think generally, I think I'm more attached to a respectful work environment than the highest paying. I saw a lot of folks at Caterpillar in the legacy plants that were so high paying they couldn't leave, and I felt like almost sorry for guys that just hated coming into work and they were stuck.
Yeah.
Whereas, and maybe inflation has caught up. That's a few years old, but whereas. You go to a plant that's a startup, and you're at startup wages, and it's going to grow, but it's not as good as maybe somewhere down the road. I think this is all a good thing for the frontline employee.
Well, I want to make a quick point that has almost nothing to do with this podcast, but I have known the value of front lines for a long time as a former St. Louis Rams fan, because the Rams are obviously a former St. Louis team, and we had Orlando Pace as a critical part of the O-line back in the Greatest Show on Turf era. So,
right.
But yes, the running backs, your Jerome Bettises, your Marshall Faulks of the world certainly had more of the spotlight, but I thought that was a great analogy to talk about how we're starting to share the glory of the line, if you will. So my next question is a follow-up to this then. what do we think the nature of the frontline worker looks like 2 to 3 years down the line? Look in your crystal ball and tell us, or look in your pint glass and tell us what you see a couple years down the line.
I am, my confidence is up this much. So I am fairly certain 2 to 3 years down the line, I don't think the workforce, I've listened to enough and read enough about the demographics. I don't think the workforce is going to change. I don't think it's going to change. And you and I are going to the same trade shows. The automation is really kicking ass right now, right? Yeah. So the automation is going to push and going to drive productivity, and AI is going to be there too. But the frontline employee that is a critical thinker, that maybe when you and I were coming up would have been pushed into college, they're going to go 100,000. It's going to be the same as the plumber story and the skilled trades right now. They're going to go, wait a second, all this debt, this doesn't really make sense to get this English degree or this journalism degree. They're going to go, I'm good with my hands. I stay at home. I don't have to move and chase this career. I can have a career here in especially Milwaukee, right? Like if you're a good process tech here, I see them being paid on the upside of definitely more than HR. It's gonna be interesting.
Yeah.
My prediction is automation. AI is gonna drive out a lot of management roles that are just pushing paper right now, and that's gonna put people going, hey, wait a second. I remember when my dad taught me to, hammer this nail or turn this wrench. Maybe I should go back to that tech school. Maybe I should check that apprenticeship out.
The technology that's available is just making these jobs more appealing than they were even just 5 to 10 years ago. Like, these are tech jobs now at the end of the day.
Right. The entry-level job is the first thing you do when you're a maintenance. I'm not a maintenance guy, but sure. I know the training. First thing you do is you ask the operator what's up, you know? And if the operator knows what's up, it's almost certain that operator is going to get promoted within a short period of time. And then on top of that is you come in with minimal mechanical ability, even just aptitude of, hey, let's figure this out. Companies are going to pay for those people to get whatever training they need, and they're going to try to hold on to them. And that, that's kind of, we help them hold on to them. But that workforce, I'm excited to see it differently. Like, I'm excited to see, and I grew up in a small, at the time, as a blue-collar town. My rich friend's dad was a plumber. Like, that's he was a rich guy.
Yeah. Was he running the business at that point? Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been telling people, it's like, if you can learn the trade and you can pick up some of the business savviness that goes with it, and then you can start running the show, man, that is a lucrative, kind of under the radar career opportunity right there.
Right. He said, and I remember this quote like it was yesterday. He's like, Mike, you can, and we're outside of I grew up outside of Champaign, so it's college town's 20 minutes away from my hometown. And he goes, I can find somebody on every corner that can write you a paper, but there is nobody that can fix a toilet. So there's only a few companies that can. And think about that concept. Think about that concept and where we're going with the workforce right now. I can find somebody that can do analyst work. I can find a entry-level marketing. I can find entry-level CFO. Not what's entry-level CFO?
Financial analyst.
Financial analyst. There we go. I could find a financial analyst. But if you can find somebody that can fix a machine, and let alone program it, where does that head? And it'll be interesting as we automate more. As we automate more in the office, what that looks like in our world.
I'm excited to see how that plays out. I'm excited to see how the adventure for Secchi plays out as well. As we wrap up, what's the best way to connect with you? Any final thoughts you want to leave the audience with? My beer's done. So,
all right.
You don't need to chug it. You only have like one sip left, but Maybe that's a new rule of the podcast. The beers need to be finished by the end of the episode.
I like that, especially they got to pound it.
Yeah.
I think I'd leave it low. So set up a demo with us.
Yeah.
Let us walk. I've talked about. I've done a lot of talking. I'm an ops guy. Show me. The thing that I'm going to hit you with just a couple results is the Fortune 500 customer we have year over year, 2022, 2023, with minimal market changes, big metro market. They implemented us, and if we look at February to July, year over year, they lost 68 less people than the previous year. This is a facility of about 400.
Nice.
68 less people, $4 to $5 grand a turnover. That's cheap.
That is 20 to 15% of the workforce right there, based on the numbers you just threw out.
It's a crazy number. I don't need the data's the data. They lost 68 less people year over year. They give us credit for having a huge impact on the 68. Are we all at 68? According to me, yes. According to them, maybe I'm 60. But
close enough. Still a big number.
It's a big number, right? So if you save that, the implications of you're well over $500,000 in savings, and then you add in all the numbers that went up because they got to keep people. And the thing that sticks out to me more than anything is don't let your bad employees chase off your good ones. We had somebody say that to us, and it is so true that if you let a bad employee, they can chase off the good ones. And when you reward and recognize the right behaviors, this is not complicated. What's complicated is getting everybody coordinated in a line. That's the complication. And that's where we come in, and we just simplify the heck out of it. And 2 clicks to value, man. That's it. So just wanted to leave you with that stat, and I appreciate your time and let me talk about Secchi.
No, this has been a blast. I love all the storytelling. This has been an hour well spent. Don't let your bad employees chase off your good ones. Great note to end it on. Obviously, everyone should know how to spell Secchi by this point because we spelled it like 3 times. But for everyone out there, there are notes. There's links over in the show notes. You'll know how to connect with Mike, all that jazz. This has been a blast. Thanks so much for coming, hanging out at the bar, doing things the way manufacturing happy hour should be done. Thanks a bunch.
Cool. Shake hands. Is that
cheers.
What you do?
Yeah, we can't cheers on an empty glass. Yeah. All right. See you, folks.